Hi, everyone. I'm glad people are checking sources, but I thought that was pretty funny. Hi,
Yeah.
everybody. Welcome to The Breakdown. I'm Allison Gill. Joining me today, Adam Klasfeld from All Rise News, which you must support because he is doing important work on the ground, including traveling on Wednesday to go and listen to the very anticipated vindictive and selective prosecution hearing in the Abrego case in Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And I'm really very interested to see, because the judge hasn't moved that hearing, even though the government was like, we're not ready. We don't have to provide privilege logs. We don't have to tell you about Jinx and
Mhm.
our witnesses because it's not a real hearing or whatever their argument is. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But first, I want to tackle. But anyway, the whole point was you got to support Adam Klasfeld because he pays for all this travel himself. He doesn't have any corporate overlords. So what I want to talk to you about before we get to Mr. Abrego and that hearing, what to expect in that hearing on Wednesday, is a hearing this morning in federal court in Minneapolis, where this was a request for a preliminary injunction or a temporary restraining order that was actually filed in December, before what happened with Alex Preddy, before what happened with Renee Good. And this was, the city and the state trying to say, hey, we're a sovereign, we can't have the feds coming in and telling us how to do this, and wanting a restraining order to basically stop what's going on while the court decides whether what's going on is legal or violative of the 10th Amendment or violative of other statutes and laws, or supremacy or commandeering, the anti-commandeering doctrine, which is part of the 10th Amendment. And so that was their argument today. And the judge really grilled Minnesota and the city of Minneapolis, but also really grilled the government. She was very thorough. So can you, Adam, talk to us briefly about what went down in this hearing, how it might impact what remedy Minnesota and Minneapolis are seeking from the court here, because it seemed to hinge on the government's argument generally being they're not helping us with what we're doing for immigration, and their sanctuary policies are hindering our law enforcement. So that's why we had to send 4,000, 2,000, 4,000. They had a disagreement about how many people to Minnesota. And Minnesota's like, yeah, but you're also taking away, you're costing us money. You're taking away our services for Minnesotans. It's violative of our rights, et cetera, as a sovereign state. So talk a little bit about what you come away with from this hearing today.
My main takeaway from this hearing is that Pam Bondi may have snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. And I'll tell you what I mean by that in a second. But that this was a very tough row to hoe for the state of Minnesota. This was a lawsuit under the 10th Amendment, broadly the state's rights amendment, but I'm going to read the actual text of it here. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. And before Pam Bondi sent a letter to Tim Walz saying, we would like you to change 3 of your policies that are against the agenda of this government, it was very difficult to form a case that a surge of federal law enforcement in the Twin Cities was not reserved to the federal government. That is to say, federal government controls federal immigration. At what point does the sheer volume of it, and this was the state's argument, this was the Twin Cities argument, at what level, when you have 4,000 people, when you have 10,000 people and city resources are diverted, at what point is this an intrusion on your sovereignty? And that was a very tough question. What made it a more viable fight is that Pam Bondi sends a letter to Tim Walz saying, we don't like 3 of your policies. We want you to give us all of your records on SNAP benefits, food assistance programs. We want you to give us your voter data, which whenever they have sued for that in court, they've lost, very convincingly lost those lawsuits. And also, we don't like your sanctuary policies. Another policy where they are racking up defeats, saying, with the court saying that the states have the right to pass laws that that govern their policies, that govern their legislatures are in charge of this. So they're losing these legal battles, and the judge asks, uh, "Is it your position that it doesn't matter how clear and this is the quote, quid pro quo is, that it never amounts to a violation of the 10th Amendment's anti-commandeering doctrine, which in essence is the doctrine that the federal government cannot force the states to pass a law or enforce the federal government's regulatory agenda. And that's what states' rights is all about. So if Pam Bondi did not send a letter to Tim Walz demanding 3 policy changes and expressly linking it to the surge in the Twin Cities, I think right now the judge still is skeptical about her power to intervene on something that's as core federal government as sending federal law enforcement into a city. I think it would be a ruling that would break new ground. What makes her even consider it is the fact that Pam Bondi has sent this letter, that Donald Trump went on Truth Social and said, Minnesota, your day of retribution is here. And when reading that quote, the attorney for the state of Minnesota said, I'm trying to imitate him as best I can. That's crazy. I mean, he was
Yeah.
emphatic, and it is crazy.
Yeah. And, I had put on a Blue Sky yesterday when Bondi had written this letter. I said, if Trump is willing to remove ICE from Minnesota if they hand over their voter rolls, then there really isn't an immigration emergency that needs them there in the first place. And I was like, hey, lawyers, check this out. This is interesting, because I thought that was interesting too. It just happened to me today, Adam. I wanted to cancel a car reservation, but I had booked a non-refundable reservation. And when I called, I didn't know I did that. When I called to see if I could modify the reservation, the guy goes, our policy is you can't modify your reservation even if your mom died. That's what he said to me. Now, as it turns out, I'm visiting my aging mother, and I was totally fine with having to pay. If he had just said, you booked a non-refundable thing, and so we can't modify it. But because he added that on there, the lady, his supervisor, was like, I'm so sorry, we'll modify your reservation, and we're sorry that we said that. That's what this Bondi letter is. Like, if you if you would have just left it alone, Minnesota would have a bigger uphill battle here. But because of that, and because of Trump's Minnesota, your retribution is here, I think it's going to be, and I know you and I were texting back and forth during this here. I'm like, boy, she's really hammering on this Bondi letter. It seems that this is a giant problem for this administration. But talk a little bit about that. I thought it was interesting. The judge kind of asked both sides. Like, if I were to say this was violative of the 10th Amendment because of the coercion that might exist because of Pam Bondi's letter and the quid pro quo, what would that look like, right? And so there was a little back and forth about that. If this letter shows enough coercion or detracts from the real issue, what would that relief look like, Adam? And also, I thought it was interesting that the judge sort of tried to drill down on what immigration policies are not being followed, what policies, sanctuary city policies, are not being followed that this surge remedies. And so, I mean, I think there were parking lots, like Minnesota wasn't letting them use public parking lots to stage their operations. I think they wouldn't hand over their driver's license stuff from the Department of Motor Vehicles, and a detainers issue, which has actually kind of been proven false. And so I think what she was getting at there was, how does sending 4,000 people to Minnesota alleviate those specific issues as part of your central argument? What did you think of that particular exchange?
Well, so to take the questions there in order, she asked point blank about her power. What kind of relief can she grant? And she asks that point blank to Minnesota's lawyer, who responded The simplest answer is to end Operation Metro Surge as defined by the federal government. That is the request. Now, to take a step back here, we need to remember Judge Menendez is the same judge who issued a much more modest order that basically said stop violating the rights of protesters, and it had some more clarity about the circumstances during which they could use pepper spray, things like that. The That order was overturned by the Eighth Circuit. She is now being presented with a request for, well, not overturned, excuse me, paused by the Eighth Circuit. She is now being presented with a request for a more sweeping order that says, halt this operation. So she is treading very carefully
Mm.
here. And she
Because
might,
of what the Eighth Circuit did with her narrower order about telling ICE what they probably shouldn't do.
right, because a federal judge's power is limited. And the fact that we are discussing this as a viable request, and I think this is a potentially viable request, is a testament to how big of a screw up Gandhi's letter is, because it provides that opening. That said, to your other point, she really drilled down and interrogated. Okay, you, the federal government, you DOJ attorney, are telling me that this isn't a quid pro quo. This isn't a shakedown, in the words of the Minnesota attorney. This isn't coercion. This is just the fact that, you know what, these policies by this blue state get in the way of law enforcement, and therefore we need 2,000 to 4,000 officers. And she's saying, okay, well, show me the nexus between you're getting voter data and how does that complicate your ability to conduct immigration enforcement in the state of Minnesota? Tell me how your ability to the sanctuary policies have actually stood in the way of your effort to effect lawful arrests when the occasion warrants. And so she was really drilling down on that. And so, in terms of what,
And how does 4,000 people on the streets alleviate the fact that you haven't handed over your voter roll?
right? Oh, absolutely. And the and the fact of the matter is that she throughout the hearing has expressed her skepticism about the reaches of her power. The fact that, this is going to go to the Eighth Circuit. She's going to tread very carefully here when asked for such sweeping relief. But she is also saying she is developing a record. And she asked at one point to the attorney for the state of Minnesota that, what if we do this? What would happen if, because the state of Minnesota said, we need this today, another person is dead, this is an emergency, it can't wait another day, it can't wait another week, it can't wait another month, we need it now. And she said, what if I denied a request for a temporary restraining order and we developed a record for a preliminary injunction? Because again, this kind of order has never been issued before, and it would be immediately appealed. And if it were immediately appealed, there could be a quick stay. If she sees a viable legal basis to challenge this because of Pam Bondi's letter, because of Trump's Truth Social post, what if we develop a record, make this more airtight, and grapple with these serious issues? And there's what's happening inside the court and what's happening outside the court. Just today, we had a phone call between Donald Trump and Tim Walz, and the readout from Tim Walz's side makes it sound like they're seriously considering withdrawing a lot of the federal agents from the city and allowing state investigators to take part in both of the pending investigations, in Renee Good's case and in Alex Preddy's case. So we may be overtaken by other events. There's been a great national reaction. Trump realizes how wildly unpopular this is. He has shaken the conscience of this nation. There are people in the streets, and he has alienated defenders of the Second Amendment. People who defend the right to bear arms have been shaken by the cabinet members' stance on the Alex Preddy case. The notion that if you are a lawful gun owner and federal agents are threatened by that, even if you're not holding the gun, even if you're not brandishing, as the administration was lying about, that the federal agents have some sort of right to shoot you, that has shaken some of Trump's base. So, whatever happens from this court, whether she feels that she has the authority to grant certain relief, she might not. She's more interested in getting these legal issues right on appeal than rushing through something that's fake, that isn't supported by the evidentiary record, when she's going to break new ground, because we haven't had a case like this where the federal government says, I'm going to put thousands of, masked, camouflage wearing officers on your streets until our agenda is obeyed by your state officials. That's never happened. And I think that Judge Menendez is really grappling now with how to deal with that.
Right, and that sort of fighting that legal battle would also impact other potential future cities where surges happen and quid pro quos are offered. I'm sure they might not, after this hearing, make it so obvious this time, but you're right. We have other things going on outside. We had the call with Walz. We have a Republican gubernatorial candidate withdrawing from the race because of what's going on with ICE. We have House Dems regretting their vote in the House to fund the DHS spending bill. We've got Tim Pool saying that this is, an execution. We've got Bartiromo is on Fox News taking Bovino to task. I've never seen anything like this. Now, it probably comes from the Second Amendment argument that a lot of the base is making about this. Fine, I kind of don't care where it comes from, but it's definitely interesting to see that develop outside of the courtroom, but to watch Judge Menendez want to make those, maybe perhaps answer those legal questions, because I don't think we've seen the end of this kind of thing.
Right.
You're going to write all this up, I'm sure, for
Yes,
All Rise News. Yeah.
There's a quick hit on the website right now, and there's going to be more to come. I mean, there's plenty of analysis. A lot has emerged in there. There's, just even something that isn't a headline of the story. She asks the state of Minnesota point blank, "Hey guys, remember that whistleblower report that said that ICE believes that it has the power to enter people's properties without a judicial warrant, a judge-signed warrant? Why didn't you file a lawsuit about that?" There are things that are developing there, and I think one of her hesitations here, especially given recent experience of the appellate court pausing her order, is there are many bases to, the courts cannot always be a deus ex machina and say, I will end the whole constellation of problems that is facing the city. They can deal with a case and controversy such as, is this secret memo that has come to light lawful? Is this practice of violating the civil rights of protesters, can that be constrained? And I think she is skeptical of the more sweeping requests to make it all go away. Now, again, and I need to emphasize this, the fact that Pam Bondi has implicitly justified this whole thing on policy provides a potential opening to that. And that should be watched because, again, I think would not have necessarily supposed that this request was viable until today, until I saw that questioning, until I saw that memo. But generally speaking, the constellation of legal battles that are playing out right now, the ones over the civil rights violations, the ones over the preservation of evidence filed by the state to make sure that, for example, Alex Preddy's cell phone is kept in order, that we eventually see the perspective when he was taping the Border Patrol officers, what other evidence that may exist, their body cam footage. That is a case that is playing out potentially. I forget the exact timing, but I think it could be going
It's
on
right
as
now.
we speak. Yeah.
I think it was 2 p.m. Central Time, which
Yeah,
is
that's
20 minutes ago. So that hearing is happening right now. He issued that temporary restraining order, and then they're having the hearing on it today.
right.
Um, so we'll follow All Rise News to see how that comes out. And for a write up on the hearing this morning, there's already a quick hit on All Rise News on it. And before I let you go, I know you were getting ready to pack and travel to the Middle District of Tennessee. Do I have that correct? Where you were going to
That's
be
correct.
attending a hearing I have been anticipating and following and waiting for very closely. It is the vindictive and selective prosecution hearing for Mr. Abrego in his criminal case, in which it is now on the burden is on the government to prove that they are not vindictively prosecuting. There's been a lot of back and forth on the docket because Abrego's lawyers are like, well, we need Jenks information on these witnesses. We need statements. We need privilege logs and things like that. The government is saying, we said that we were going to give you that in court, but we were wrong. This isn't a trial, technical hearing under Rule 26(2) or something like that. So we don't have to provide you with that. So we're not going to. So now I don't think that Abrego's team is sufficiently prepared to rebut whatever the government's witnesses say in court on Wednesday. That will make it interesting as well when that hearing happens, because the judge has refused to change the hearing. It's been moved a zillion times. So talk about what we can anticipate on Wednesday, and again, All Rise News will be there.
Thank you so much, Allison. Well, what is happening Wednesday, as you said, is an evidentiary hearing. We're going to hear testimony from the government to try to overcome the presumption of vindictiveness that has attached to the government by virtue of the fact that Todd Blanche went on TV and said that the investigation into Kilmar Abrego Garcia began because a judge questioned their decision to uh, whisk him out of the country without any due process and into CCOT, where people have been routinely tortured and where Abrego himself reported torture. That the fact that that was what Todd Blanche said was the genesis of the investigation, that's the definition of vindictive prosecution, and it led Judge Crenshaw to order this hearing, which has been delayed multiple times. Now, the government will try to persuade the judge that there's a genuine reason. They're going to say that that they're going to talk about the offenses charged, which is smuggling allegations, not trafficking allegations, as we have reviewed a number of times, Allison and me. What is going to happen is they're going to have to supply explanations for a bunch of emails that became public late last year that Allison and I talked about, that showed that when acting U.S. attorney of that district, Mr. McGuire, had claimed that he made this decision entirely independently without any interference from Maine Justice. Well, that's not exactly true. We have emails now from Todd Blanche's deputy saying that they're Akash Singh, who said that described waiting for clearance on the draft indictment. We're seeing some level of coordination. They're going to have to supply some sort of explanation for that. That makes it not look like this was essentially a backlash against Abrego in order to chill and to send a message that, hey, if you assert your right, if you challenge the government sending you out of the country to El Salvador to be in prison at a notorious prison, a prison that one judge called one of the most dangerous prisons in the Western Hemisphere. And because you challenge that, we're going to prosecute you. That is a basis, no matter what, whether the government cannot argue, well, you know what? I can prove this case. I can prove that he smuggled immigrants across state lines and he was involved in this smuggling conspiracy back in 2022. That is irrelevant to the fact of whether the purpose of this prosecution is vindictive. Whether or not he's guilty of the crime is up to a jury. But whether he is being prosecuted for the purpose of sending a message of don't defend your rights. That's why there are prohibitions on vindictive prosecution. So I'll be covering the testimony, I'll be covering the evidence, and I'll be covering what the judge says. We'll see if he rules from the bench. More likely, he's going to rule in a ruling, but in any event, we're going to see what happens in court because this is the first real test, and Abrego has gone farther than anyone else on this issue. There have been other motions for vindictive prosecution, but the fact that he's having this hearing is a victory and gives him the greater odds at this point. We'll see what pans out on Wednesday.
Yeah, as does the fact that because Todd Blanche opened his big fat mouth on Fox News, there is a prima facie showing of vindictiveness, which now shifts the burden to the government to prove that they're not vindictively prosecuting him. Thank you so much for your time. I'm going to run this whole interview, by the way, all the audio, over on tomorrow's Daily Beans podcast. If you guys want news that informs you without stressing you out, might include some appropriate profanity, women run organization. If you want that kind of news, please check out the Daily Beans. It's free. It's every morning. It's free. It gives you all your headlines up front. And then if that's good enough, you can stop. Then we break them down a little bit. And then at the end, we actually do some good news from listeners so that you can kind of walk away feeling a little bit better about the world. Again, it's a free podcast. It's been out there for a long time, but if you've not listened to it, please check it out. It's called the Daily Beans. And if you are able to support All Rise News, you can have a paid subscription to Adam Klasfeld's Substack so that you can help support him and his travel to get all of this information to you as quickly as possible before DHS comes and lies about it first. That kind of truth and knowledge is super important, especially the speed of it and the on-the-ground nature of it during these times. That's super, super important because of the DHS's propaganda machine and the right-wing noise machine, and that corporate media is not helping us too much. So if you're able to support All Rise News, please do. You can also subscribe to my Substack. It's free to do as well, and never any paywalls. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I look forward to what goes on. And I wish I could be there with you in Tennessee this Wednesday to see what happens on the ground in the Abrego case.
Well, we'll talk about it soon, I'm certain.
Yes, we will. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in to The Breakdown. We'll see you next time.
Talk to you soon.